Hey, my friends, tonight, imagine, if you will, that the gentle hum of your refrigerator or the distant sigh of city traffic isn't your usual soundscape. Instead, picture yourself not in your comfy bed, but perched on the swaying hull of a wooden outrigger canoe, the rhythmic slap of waves against the timbers, a constant living beat. The air isn't still. It's alive with the taste of salt spray and the vast open breath of the Pacific Ocean. You look around, and there's no land in sight, just an endless expanse of deep, shimmering blue under a canopy of stars so bright they seem close enough to touch. This isn't a holiday cruise. This is survival. This is exploration. This is how your ancestors, if you hail from the islands of Southeast Asia and Oceania, once painted their maps onto the very fabric of the cosmos. Tonight, we're drifting back to a time when ancient Filipino sailors, masters of the sea, didn't just look at the stars. They sang them, using melodies and rhythms to chart their course across the immensity. And let me tell you, with nothing but a loincloth, perhaps a few provisions, and a profound understanding of the natural world, you probably wouldn't survive this. Your smartphone's GPS would be a useless brick in about 5 minutes, and honestly, without a lifetime of training, neither would most of us. Let's be real. It's a world away from asking Siri for directions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, maybe drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ocean for these early voyages wasn't just a body of water. It was a living entity, a vast breathing expanse that both offered life and threatened to take it away in an instant. You feel it now, don't you? The subtle rock of your bed transforming into the gentle sway of the canoe. This immense blue canvas stretching beyond any horizon you've ever conceived was their highway, their hunting ground, their mystery, and their home. We call it the Pacific, a name that suggests peace. But for those who truly knew it, it was a creature of myriad moods, sometimes serene and inviting, other times a raging beast of towering waves and shrieking winds. You're out there months from any familiar shore part of a tradition of Austronesian expansion that represents one of humanity's most incredible feats of exploration, a slow, deliberate peopling of islands scattered like jewels across a third of the Earth's surface. The Philippines, with its thousands of islands, served as a crucial crucible, a place where these seafaring skills were honed to an art form before voyagers pushed ever further east, south, and north. Historians still argue whether the initial impetus for these voyages was population pressure, resource scarcity, or simply an unquenchable spirit of adventure, but the result was the same humans in relatively small, open boats conquering the largest ocean on the planet. Imagine the sheer audacity. You're not just popping down to the local shop. You're committing your life and the lives of your companions to the whims of this colossal, liquid giant. The sun beats down, and there's no escape from its glare, except perhaps the shade of your sail, if you even have one that day. At night, the stars aren't just pretty lights. They are your map, your clock, your calendar, your very lifeline. Forget your five-star hotel. Your sleeping quarters are a shared space on a damp wooden plank, and room service is whatever fish you manage to catch, or the preserved taro you've been carefully rationing. Luxury. You chuckle to yourself, is a dry loincloth. The sheer scale of it is difficult for us in our hyper-connected world to truly grasp. You could sail for weeks, seeing nothing but water and sky. The isolation would be profound, broken only by the calls of seabirds or the occasional glimpse of a whale breaching in the distance. Signs that were not just marvels of nature, but crucial pieces of information. These sailors weren't just passengers. They were active participants, constantly reading the subtle language of the sea. The color of the water, the direction of the swells, the type of clouds forming on the horizon, the flight paths of birds. All of it fed into a complex, living database stored not on a silicon chip, but within their minds, and as we'll explore, within their songs. And it wasn't just a physical challenge, it was profoundly spiritual. The ocean was teeming with spirits, with deities, with forces both benevolent and malevolent. Many ancient cultures across the Austronesian world shared a deep reverence for the sea, personifying its aspects. Perhaps you whisper a prayer to Amansinaya, an ancient Tagalog goddess of the sea, or make a small offering to ensure safe passage through a particularly turbulent stretch of water. Some scholars suggest that certain currents or remote ocean areas were believed to be the domains of specific powerful entities, places where one did not venture lightly, or perhaps at all, without the correct rituals or an overwhelming need. It's a bit like avoiding that one dodgy street on your way home, but with much more mythical and potentially damp consequences. The air itself feels different out here. It's cleaner, sharper, carrying scents you'd never encounter on land. The ozone tang before a squall, the subtle earthy smell of a distant unseen island carried on the breeze, or the rich fishy aroma that signals a teeming reef nearby. Your senses become heightened, attuned to the faintest shifts in the environment. That faint change in wind direction. Not just a breeze, but a message. That particular pattern of wave chop. Not just random water, but an indicator of a submerged reef or a distant landmass. It's this deep, almost instinctual connection to the environment that we, with our air-conditioned lives and weather apps, have largely forgotten. It makes you wonder if we've traded genuine understanding for convenient information, doesn't it? Though admittedly not having to worry about a rogue wave capsizing your bed is a definite perk of modernity. You are part of a lineage of navigators whose skills were so profound they seem almost magical to us today. They didn't have sextants, chronometers, or satellite uplinks. They had their wits, their senses, generations of accumulated knowledge, and the stars above woven into the very rhythm of their lives and the melodies they carried across the vast, untamed waters. This ocean wasn't a barrier. It was the thread that connected cultures, facilitated trade, and allowed for the spread of people and ideas across an enormous watery realm. This was their world, and they were its masters, singing their way across the blue. Now let's talk about your ride. You're not just floating on a log, though perhaps the earliest Austronesian explorers started with something not much more sophisticated. By the time we're focusing on, you're likely in a balangay or a similar type of outrigger canoe, a vessel so perfectly adapted to its environment that its basic design endured for millennia. Picture this. A long, sleek hull, often carved from a single massive tree trunk, or built up with expertly fitted planks sewn together with natural fibers like coir. That's coconut husk rope for the uninitiated. It's a bit like your high-end bespoke tailoring, but for boats, and instead of silk thread, you're using nature's toughest twine. The seams would then be caulked with resins and gums to make them watertight. Attached to one or both sides of this main hull, you have the outriggers, those long, buoyant floats extending outwards parallel to the boat. These are the secret sauce, the feature that gives the balangay its incredible stability. Think of them as training wheels for your canoe, but far more elegant and essential for surviving the open ocean. They prevent the relatively narrow main hull from capsizing in rough seas or when under sail, allowing for a lighter, faster design. Some larger balangays might have had two outriggers, one on each side, a double outrigger, making them exceptionally steady platforms even in choppy waters. You feel that stability now? The way the outrigger float on your port side, dips and rises counteracting the roll of the main hull, a gentle reassuring dance with the waves. The craftsmanship involved in building a balangay was immense. These weren't just tools. They were works of art imbued with the spirit of the community and the skill of generations of boat builders. Historians marvel at the precision achieved with relatively simple tools. Adzes made of stone or shell fire for hollowing logs and immense patience. Finding a tree suitable for the main hull of a large balangay was a significant event, often accompanied by rituals and ceremonies. There's a mainstream historical fact for you. The oldest known balangay boats discovered in Butuan, Philippines, date back as early as 320 AD, and some are truly massive, up to 25 meters long, capable of carrying dozens of people and significant cargo. Imagine the community effort to fell transport and carve such a colossal piece of timber. Now for a quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that certain boat builders had almost a sixth sense for choosing the right wood, listening to the tree, as it were, to understand its inner strength and suitability. They might tap the trunk and listen to the resonance, or even spend days observing a tree before deciding it was worthy of becoming a vessel. It sounds a bit like a tree whisperer, doesn't it? Oh, this ancient hardwood says it dreams of distant shores and carrying singing sailors. Perfect. While perhaps embellished, it speaks to a deep respect for materials and an intuitive understanding of their properties. The size of your balangay can vary. You might be on a smaller, nimbler craft designed for inter-island travel, or fishing, perhaps crewed by a handful of sailors. Or you could be part of a flotilla on a much larger vessel, a veritable floating village carrying families, livestock like pigs and chickens, yes, live animals, making the journey even more. Aromatic and vital plants like taro yams and breadfruit seedlings ready to colonize new lands. The logistics of keeping chickens happy, or at least alive, on a multi-week ocean voyage before the invention of chicken coops as we know them is a historical head-scratcher that probably involved a lot of squawking and misplaced eggs. Let's consider the sail. It would likely be a rectangular or triangular sail, often made from woven pandanus leaves or other plant fibers. Surprisingly durable and efficient. You learn to read the wind, to trim the sail, to catch every puff, to coax speed and direction from the invisible currents of the air. When the wind fails, or when Maneuvering in tight spaces, it's time for paddles. The rhythmic dip and pull of paddles, often accompanied by chants or work songs, becomes another familiar sound, another heartbeat of the journey. You can feel the strain in your shoulders, the burn in your arms, but it's a communal effort, everyone working in concert. Historians still argue whether these early Southeast Asian sailors utilized the fore and aft sail like the crab claw sail famous in Polynesia from the very beginning, or if earlier forms were simpler square sails better for downwind sailing. The crab claw sail, with its distinctive triangular shape, is incredibly efficient for sailing into the wind, a crucial advantage for exploration and making return voyages. The debate often centers on interpreting ancient boat depictions and the spread of sail technology across the region. Inside the barangay space is at a premium. Every item has its purpose, every person their designated spot. Provisions, dried fish, preserved fruits, starchy roots, and precious water stored in bamboo tubes or clay jars are carefully stored. Tools for fishing, for repairs, for defense if necessary, are kept within easy reach. There's a central fire pit, a carefully managed hearth on a bed of sand or stone for cooking and warmth, though using it in rough seas would be a truly exciting and potentially boat-igniting culinary challenge. Anyone fancy some slightly singed canoe with their grilled fish? These vessels weren't just transport. They were microcosms of society. There would be a leader, the most experienced navigator whose word was law. There would be skilled fishermen, craftsmen capable of repairing the boat or its rigging, and everyone played a role in the daily tasks of sailing, bailing water because no wooden boat is ever completely dry, and preparing food. Living in such close quarters for extended periods required a strong social structure and a good deal of tolerance. You can only imagine the interpersonal dramas that might unfold. Oke, who used the last clean coconut shell for bailing and didn't rinse it. We've talked about this, people. The barangay's design, with its shallow draft, also made it ideal for navigating coastal waters, reef systems, and even venturing up rivers. This versatility was key to its success, allowing sailors to explore and exploit a wide range of marine environments. It wasn't just an open ocean greyhound, it was an all-terrain vehicle of the seas. And as you settle into the rhythm of the waves, feeling the give and take of the outrigger, you understand that this vessel isn't just wood and fiber. It's a testament to human ingenuity, a perfectly evolved creature of the sea, your sturdy, reliable home on the vast, indifferent ocean. Now nestled in your barangay, far from any comforting glow of city lights, you look up. The night sky isn't just a pretty backdrop. It's your map, your compass, your clock. The stars, the moon, and the sun are the unwavering, universally understood signposts in this vast, featureless ocean. Forget your fancy digital displays. This is celestial navigation in its purest, most ancient form. You feel the cool night air on your skin, the gentle rocking of the canoe, a constant reminder of the living sea beneath you. The primary tool for direction finding, especially on long voyages, was the stars. Ancient Filipino navigators, like their counterparts across Oceania, possessed an incredibly detailed knowledge of star patterns, their rising and setting points, and their movement across the night sky throughout the year. You wouldn't just know the major constellations we recognize today, like Orion or the Pleiades. You'd have your own names for them, your own stories woven around them, and crucially, you'd know precisely where they would appear on the horizon at different times of the night and in different seasons. Historians confirm that Austronesian sailors memorized hundreds of stars and their paths. It's like having an internal planetarium, but one that directly dictates your survival. Imagine your lead navigator, perhaps an elder with eyes that have seen countless nights like this, pointing to a specific star, just breaking the horizon. That star, he might say, his voice low and steady against the whisper of the waves, is our guide to the island of our ancestors. Keep it just off the port bow. And so, you steer, keeping that celestial beacon in its designated position relative to your vessel, as that star climbs higher and eventually sets another star, whose path you also know intimately will rise to take its place as a guide. It's a continuous flowing system of star targets. You aren't just aiming for a single point, you're following a carefully choreographed cosmic dance. The moon too played its part. Its phases provided a way to mark time, a lunar calendar, essential for planning long voyages and understanding seasonal shifts in weather and ocean currents. The direction of the moonrise and moonset also offered directional cues, though less consistently than the stars due to its own more complex orbit. You'd note its position relative to guiding stars, using it as another layer of confirmation. Perhaps you'd even have a saying, something like, "When the full moon kisses the sleeping serpent constellation, the currents run swiftest towards the ancestral lands." And then there's the sun, the most obvious celestial marker. Its rising point in the east and setting point in the west are fundamental directional indicators. But it's more nuanced than just sun up east, sun down west. The exact point where the sun rises and sets changes throughout the year, moving north and south between the solstices. Skilled navigators understood this seasonal shift and could use the sun's arc across the sky to estimate latitude, how far north or south they were. They might observe the sun's height at midday, perhaps, by measuring the length of a shadow cast by a vertical stick, though this is a technique more documented in later Polynesian navigation. Historians still argue whether early Filipino navigators used such precise methods for latitude sailing or relied more on a holistic understanding of star positions and environmental cues. One quirky and rather clever tidbit is the concept of a star compass. This wasn't a physical instrument, but a mental construct. The navigator would memorize a wind rose of sorts, but instead of cardinal directions, it was marked by the rising and setting points of key stars. So, an instruction might not be head east, but head towards the rising of specific star name. This system, intimately tied to the local celestial sphere, was incredibly effective. Some Pacific Islander cultures are known to have had zenith star navigation, where knowing which star passed directly overhead at your home island could tell you if you were on the correct latitude when voyaging. If that star passed north of your zenith, you were too far south, and vice versa. It's brilliantly simple, yet requires immense observational skill. It makes you wonder if your own ability to find your way home without Google Maps is quite as sharp as you thought. Turn left at the big glowing sky dot just doesn't have the same ring to it. Keeping track of your position wasn't just about knowing where to go. It was also about knowing where you were and how to get back. This is where the concept of dead reckoning comes in, even without the fancy charts and speed logs of later eras. You'd estimate your speed based on how fast the water was moving past the hull, or by timing how long it took for a piece of flotsam to pass from bow to stern. You'd mentally log the direction, steer the time spent on each tack, and combine this with your celestial observations to build a running mental map of your progress. It's like your brain is the ship's computer, constantly calculating and recalculating. Okay, we sailed towards the shiny fish constellation for 2 moon cycles, then the wind shifted and we aimed for the laughing turtle stars for another. So we should be somewhere near that cloud that looks suspiciously like a giant squid. Okay, maybe a bit more precise than that. The beauty of this system is its resilience. Clouds might obscure the stars for a night or two, but the knowledge of their patterns and the ability to integrate other signs, which we'll get to, meant you weren't completely lost. The sun would eventually break through the moon, would reappear. This celestial compass was always there, a gift from the heavens understood by those patient and observant enough to learn its language. It's a profound connection to the universe, a way of finding your place not just on the earth, but within the cosmos itself. You glance up again, and those distant points of light feel less like random scatterings and more like old reliable friends whispering the secrets of the ocean pathways. Now, as you continue your voyage, lulled by the ocean's rhythm and guided by the silent wisdom of the stars, let's delve into one of the most enchanting aspects of this ancient maritime tradition, the singing star maps. This isn't about sheet music or formal cartography as we know it. Instead, imagine vital navigational knowledge, star positions, island locations, current patterns, even safe anchorages, encoded into the very fabric of songs, chants, and epic poems. You feel the vibrations of a low chant starting among the crew, a melody that seems as old as the waves themselves. The idea is that in a purely oral culture where written records are non-existent or impractical, on a damp, swaying canoe music and storytelling become powerful mnemonic devices. Rhyme, rhythm, and melody make complex information easier to remember, to transmit accurately across generations, and crucially to recall under pressure. Think about how easily you can remember the lyrics to a song you haven't heard in years versus trying to recall a paragraph from a textbook. It's the same principle, but applied to life or death navigational tasks. Mainstream historical and anthropological consensus supports that many Pacific Islander cultures, including those in and around the Philippines, use chants and songs as repositories of ancestral knowledge, including navigational lore. So, a song might not literally say, sail 3 days towards the morning star, then look for a reef shaped like a sleeping giant. Instead, the journey, the star patterns, the sea marks, and the destination would be woven into a narrative, a story song. The rising of a particular sequence of stars might be described as the gods lighting their torches to guide the hero to the sacred grove. The sacred grove could be a metaphor for a specific fertile island and the sequence of torches, the stars you follow. The rhythm of the song might even mimic the paddling cadence needed for a certain leg of the journey, or the meter could subtly indicate distances or travel times. You hear the navigator begin a low, resonant chant. The lyrics speak of mythical heroes, of voyages to spirit lands, of encounters with sea creatures and gods. But woven into these epic tales are precise astronomical details. A verse describing a hero's plea to a specific star god might actually be a cue for when that star is at its zenith, indicating a certain latitude. Another part of the song, detailing a tricky passage through a reef system, might have a faster, more complex rhythm, reflecting the heightened attention and quicker maneuvers required. Historians still argue about the exact degree to which these songs were literal maps versus more general frameworks for remembering key sequences of information. Were they point-to-point directions, or more like epic poems that reinforced a broader understanding of the seascape and skyscape? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Now for a quirky and rather lovely thought, imagine different islands or island groups having their own navigational playlists. A song that guides you from island A to island B would be different from the one guiding you from island B to island C. An experienced navigator would possess a whole repertoire of these song charts, each melody a key to unlocking a specific route. It's like having a mental Spotify, but instead of mood-based playlists, you have songs for sailing to summer, or melodies for making it to Mindanao. They, perhaps a young apprentice struggling to remember a complex sequence of star bearings, would be told by his mentor, sing the Whispering Wind's Journey. Again, boy, you're forgetting the verse about the shark's tooth rock. The songs could also encode information about ocean conditions. A passage sung in a deep rumbling tone might signify an area known for strong currents or deep swells, while a lighter, more lilting melody could indicate calmer waters or the presence of a sheltered bay. The emotional content of the music itself could serve as a cue. A mournful section might remind the navigator of a particularly dangerous reef where an ancestor's canoe was wrecked, prompting extra caution. It's a far cry from your sat-nav's monotone. In 200 yards, turn left. This is navigation with soul, with history, with a deep cultural resonance. Think about the training. Young apprentices wouldn't just be looking at the stars. They'd be listening to them, learning the songs that bound the sky to the sea. They would learn these melodies by heart, verse by verse, until the knowledge was as ingrained as their own name. The master navigator wouldn't just point, he would sing. The canoe itself would become a sort of concert hall, the paddlers perhaps providing a percussive beat, the wind in the sail, a natural accompaniment. This makes the process of learning navigation not just a technical skill, but a deeply immersive cultural experience. Right, lads, tonight's lesson is the Ballad of the Three Bright Brothers and the Hidden Lagoon. Pay attention, there's a pop quiz on whirlpool avoidance tomorrow. The very act of singing these star maps together on a long voyage would also reinforce communal bonds, keeping spirits up during challenging times. It's a shared cultural touchstone, a reminder of their ancestors' prowess and a living connection to their heritage. When you're weeks from land, surrounded by nothing but the vastness of the ocean, hearing those familiar melodies, those sung instructions that have guided your people for generations, must have been incredibly reassuring. So as the stars wheel overhead and the ancient chants fill the night air of your barangay, you realize this isn't just folklore. This is a sophisticated, time-tested system of knowledge transmission, perfectly adapted to its environment and the needs of its people. The cosmos itself becomes a songbook, and these ancient Filipino sailors were its most devoted and skilled chorus, singing their way across the Pacific, their voices echoing the timeless music of the spheres. While the stars, sun, and moon were your primary celestial guides, your ancestors, these master mariners knew that the sky wasn't the only place to find directions or predict conditions. The ocean itself and the life within and around it was a rich, open book full of subtle clues for those who knew how to read them. You shift your gaze from the glittering canopy above to the dark, moving surface of the water, feeling the intricate dance of the waves beneath your barangay. One of the most critical non-celestial signs was the ocean swell. Out on the open sea, far from any landmass that might disrupt them, swells are remarkably consistent, long rolling waves generated by distant storms, sometimes hundreds or even thousands of miles away. Even when the local wind is blowing in a different direction, these underlying ground swells continue on their original path. An experienced navigator could feel these swells through the hull of the canoe even in the dark. They would know the characteristic swell patterns that indicated the direction of prevailing winds in different seasons, and more importantly, they could detect how these swells were refracted or reflected by distant, unseen islands. This is a mainstream historical fact. The ability to read swell patterns was a cornerstone of Pacific navigation. Imagine lying flat on the deck of the barangay, your cheek pressed against the wood, literally feeling the ocean's pulse. You learn to distinguish between the wind-driven chop on the surface and the deeper, more powerful rhythm of the ground swell. When a swell passes an island, it bends around it, creating a shadow zone on the leeward side, and a distinctive pattern of intersecting waves where the refracted swells meet. By sensing these subtle changes in the wave patterns, perhaps a slight confusion in the rhythm, a new direction of secondary motion, a navigator could detect the presence and approximate direction of an island long before it was visible, sometimes from as far as 30 to 50 miles away. It's like having a natural sonar built into your backside and the keel of your boat. Feel that apprentice, the waters arguing with itself. Land is whispering to us from the west. Wind patterns were, of course, crucial. Beyond just using the wind to fill the sails, navigators understood the seasonal monsoons, the Amihan northeast monsoon and the Habagat southwest monsoon in the Philippines, which dictated the best times for voyages in specific directions. They also paid close attention to localized wind shifts that could signal changes in weather or the proximity of land, as land masses can alter wind flow. A sudden change in wind temperature or humidity could also be an indicator. Then there's the wildlife. Certain species of seabirds, for instance, have predictable foraging patterns. Some birds fly out from land in the morning to feed and return in the evening. Spotting these birds and noting their flight direction and time of day could give you a reliable line towards land. The type of bird mattered too. Some species rarely venture more than a certain distance from shore. So, if you see a land-roosting frigate bird soaring high, you know land isn't too far off. If all you're seeing are pelagic birds that spend their entire lives at sea, well, keep paddling. Historians still argue about the precise distances different bird species could reliably indicate land from, as it varies greatly, but their utility as general pointers is widely accepted. Fish and marine mammals could also provide clues. Schools of certain types of fish or the presence of dolphins and whales might indicate upwellings or areas of particular marine productivity, which could in turn be associated with underwater seamounts or the edges of island shelves. Even the color and clarity of the water could tell a story. Deeper ocean water is often a clear dark blue, while shallower waters near land or areas with significant river runoff might be greener or more turbid. You'd learn to read these subtle shifts in hue like an artist studying a palette. A quirky tidbit: some oral traditions speak of navigators tasting the salinity of the water, though how accurately one could detect subtle changes indicative of freshwater runoff from a distant island by taste alone is a matter of some, shall we say, salty debate. Perhaps it was more about noticing a general freshening of the sea spray. And what about clouds? Clouds often form over islands, especially volcanic ones, as moist ocean air is pushed upwards by the landmass. A stationary bank of clouds on an otherwise clear horizon could be a telltale sign of land beneath it. The underside of clouds can also reflect the color of the lagoon or vegetation below. A greenish tinge on the bottom of a cloud might suggest a shallow lagoon with coral reefs, while a darker hue could indicate dense forest. It's like nature's own primitive satellite imagery. See that puffy fellow over there that hasn't moved all morning and looks a bit like a giant taro? I'd wager my best fishing hook there's an island napping underneath it. Even the scent of the air could carry information. The fragrance of blossoms, damp earth, or wood smoke from cooking fires could travel surprisingly far over the water, signaling land before it was visible, especially if you were downwind. Your nose becomes another navigational instrument, constantly sampling the breeze for telltale aromas. All these observations, swells, winds, birds, fish, watercolor, clouds, scents, weren't used in isolation. They were woven together, cross-referenced with celestial observations, and filtered through the navigator's vast repository of experience and traditional knowledge. It was a holistic, deeply intuitive process. If the stars said one thing, but the swell pattern and bud behavior suggested another, the navigator would need to reconcile these anomalies, perhaps deciding that a current was stronger than anticipated or that they were slightly off course. This constant synthesis of information is what made these ancient mariners so incredibly adept. They weren't just following a single set of instructions. They were having a continuous conversation with the ocean and the sky. So you have the stars, the ocean swells, the flight of birds, all whispering their secrets to you. But this immense body of knowledge, this intricate art of wayfinding, wasn't something you could just pick up from a manual or a quick online tutorial. Mostly because paper and the internet were still a few millennia away from being popular on canoes. This wisdom was painstakingly passed down from master to apprentice, generation after generation, through a deeply personal and immersive oral tradition. You watch the lead navigator, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he scans the horizon and you, his young apprentice, hang on his every word and gesture. The training of a navigator would begin at a very young age. As a child growing up in a seafaring community, the ocean would be your playground, the canoe your second home. You'd learn to swim almost before you could walk, to fish, to read the weather in the clouds. You'd hear the stories of great voyages, the chants that encoded star paths, and the names of distant islands whispered like legends around the evening fire. This early immersion was crucial, building an intuitive feel for the sea and its rhythms, a foundation upon which more formal training could be built. A mainstream historical fact is that in many Pacific Islander societies, including those with Austronesian roots, the selection and training of navigators were highly structured, often involving years, even decades, of dedicated learning. As a promising youngster, perhaps showing a particular aptitude for observation or a keen memory, you might be chosen by an established navigator, often a relative like an uncle or grandfather, to become an apprentice. This wasn't a casual undertaking. It was a sacred trust. You were committing to learn a skill set vital for the survival and prosperity of your community. Your master would become your mentor, your guide, your living encyclopedia of the sea. Forget pop quizzes. Your tests were real-life scenarios, where a mistake could mean being hopelessly lost, or worse, capsized miles from anywhere. Talk about pressure to perform. Now, boy, which star told us that joke about the crab and the coconut last night? And more importantly, where did it say we'd find fresh water? Much of the learning would be hands-on, taking place on actual voyages. You'd start with simple tasks, learning the names of the parts of the canoe, how to handle the sails and paddles, how to bail water effectively, a surprisingly important skill. Gradually, you'd be introduced to the basics of navigation. Your master would point out key stars, explaining their paths and their significance. He'd teach you to feel the swells, to interpret the wind, to identify different seabirds, and understand what their presence signified. He wouldn't just tell you, he'd show you again and again until the knowledge started to seep into your very bones. A quirky but essential part of the training involved memorization, vast amounts of it. You'd have to memorize star charts. The mental kind, remember the sung epics that contained navigational routes, genealogies that connected your people to other island groups, and countless observations about currents, weather patterns, and sea marks. Repetition was key. Your master would chant the navigational songs, and you would repeat them hour after hour until the melodies and the information they held were inextricably linked in your mind. Historians still argue about the exact mnemonic techniques used beyond song and story, but it's clear that these cultures had highly developed systems for retaining and recalling complex information without writing. Perhaps specific hand gestures or patterns in woven mats were also used as memory aids. There were likely practical exercises too. On land, your master might use pebbles or shells to represent stars and islands, creating a terrestrial model of the seascape and skyscape. He might draw diagrams in the sand explaining how swell patterns change as they approach land. He would constantly quiz you, testing your knowledge, pushing you to observe more keenly, to think more critically. If the wind shifts 3 fingers to the left of the sleeping shark's fin and the waves start to sing the song of angry clams. Which way do you steer to avoid your ancestors' watery disappointment? It's a bit more evocative than recalculating route. D. Patience was paramount, both for the master and the apprentice. This wasn't a fast-track course. Some complex navigational concepts might take years to fully grasp. There would be frustrations, moments of doubt. But the master navigator would guide you, correcting your mistakes, encouraging your progress, sharing not just his knowledge, but also his reverence for the ocean and the traditions of his people. It was a holistic education, shaping not just your skills, but also your character. You learned humility in the face of the ocean's power, resourcefulness in solving problems, and leadership in guiding others. As your skills developed, you'd be given more responsibility. You might be asked to take the helm for a short period to identify a guiding star or to predict an upcoming change in weather. Your master would observe you closely, offering quiet corrections or nods of approval. The ultimate test, of course, would be to guide a canoe yourself, perhaps on a familiar route at first, then on more challenging long-distance voyages. The moment when your master finally acknowledged you as a fully fledged navigator capable of taking on the mantle of guiding your people across the sea would have been a profound rite of passage. This master-apprentice system ensured the continuity of vital knowledge. It was a living chain stretching back through countless generations of seafarers. Each navigator was a link in that chain, receiving the wisdom of the past and adding to it with their own experiences before passing it on to the next generation. It was a system built on trust, respect, and a shared commitment to mastering the art of journeying across the great ocean. And as you stand on the deck, feeling the salt spray, you know you are part of this incredible, unbroken lineage. These incredible voyages stretching across the vast liquid continents of the Pacific and Indian Oceans weren't solely driven by the urgent need to find new homes or the thrill of discovery. Your journey on the Balangay, while certainly part of that larger exploratory spirit, is also deeply intertwined with trade, with the exchange of goods, ideas, and even people. The sea lanes charted by your ancestors were also vital economic and cultural highways. You adjust the sail slightly, catching a favorable breeze, your mind perhaps on the exotic goods you hope to acquire at your next landfall. Even before the great long-distance migrations to remote Oceania, a vibrant network of maritime trade existed throughout Southeast Asia, connecting the islands of the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the mainland. Mainstream historical fact, archaeological evidence such as Chinese ceramics found in ancient Filipino gravesites dating back centuries before European contact, and Filipino artifacts found elsewhere in Asia points to well-established sea trade routes. These weren't isolated communities. They were part of a dynamic, interconnected maritime world. Your barangay might be laden with local products, perhaps aromatic resins, beeswax pearls, or finely woven textiles, destined for a trading port several islands away. Imagine arriving at a bustling coastal settlement. The shore is lined with canoes and larger trading vessels from different regions, their sails displaying varied patterns. The air is thick with the scent of spices drying fish and the murmur of different languages and dialects. Here you might trade your local goods for things not available on your home island. Perhaps metal tools, bronze, or iron, depending on the period, and location pottery from a renowned kiln center, precious beads, or even exotic foodstuffs. It's an ancient marketplace, vibrant and full of opportunity. Right, who's got the best price on obsidian today, and does anyone know if the spicy nut emporium from the southern islands has made port, yet their chili-infused betel nut is legendary? This seaborne barter system was crucial for the distribution of resources. Not all islands were created equal. Some might be rich in timber, suitable for boat building. Others might have fertile volcanic soil ideal for agriculture, while still others might control access to valuable fishing grounds or pearl beds. Trade allowed communities to specialize and to obtain what they lacked, fostering a degree of interdependence. You might be from an island known for its exceptionally strong abaca fiber, perfect for ropes and cordage. You trade this with a community that has access to good quality clay, for pottery, something your own island lacks. Both communities benefit. Historians still argue about the extent and complexity of these early trading networks. Were they mostly opportunistic based on chance encounters and short-range exchanges, or were there more organized long-distance trading corporations and established market centers akin to the later Silk Road? But on the sea, the evidence suggests a spectrum with local regular exchanges forming the bedrock, punctuated by more ambitious long-range commercial ventures, especially as boat technology and navigational skills improved. The discovery of the Butuan balangays, some large enough to be considered trading ships, certainly supports the idea of significant cargo carrying capacity. A quirky aspect of this trade might have been the exchange of intangible goods. Alongside physical products, these voyages facilitated the spread of ideas, technologies, stories, artistic motifs, and even religious beliefs. A new song style heard in a distant port might be brought back and adapted. A clever fishing technique observed among another group could be adopted. The genes flowed too, as traders sometimes married into or formed alliances with communities they visited, further strengthening the bonds between islands. Your balanga isn't just carrying pots and pearls. It's a vessel of cultural transmission. Picked up a catchy new sea shanty about a man eating clam, and also this rather nifty way to weave waterproof hats. Productive trip. The value of goods could be quite different from what we'd expect today. Gold, while certainly prized, might in some contexts be less valuable than high-quality obsidian for tool making or specific types of shells used for adornment or ritual purposes. Spices which later drove European exploration were already important commodities within these Asian maritime networks. The concept of wealth was perhaps more diverse, encompassing not just material possessions, but also social connections, esoteric knowledge, like navigation or healing, and spiritual power. Navigators themselves, with their specialized knowledge, would have been highly respected figures in these trading networks. Their ability to safely guide vessels laden with valuable cargo to distant ports and back made them indispensable. They weren't just pilots. They were often entrepreneurs, diplomats, and guardians of the trade routes. Their knowledge of different cultures, languages, and markets would have been a significant asset. So as your balangay cuts through the waves, It's part of a much larger ancient system of connection and exchange. Each island landfall is not just a place to restock water and food, but an opportunity to engage, to trade, to learn, and to share. The ocean, far from being a barrier, is the very thing that links these diverse communities, creating a sprawling, interconnected civilization bound by the rhythm of the tides and the enterprise of its seafaring peoples. You are a thread in this vast, watery web of commerce and culture. As you sail under the vast, indifferent gaze of the cosmos, a tiny speck of humanity on an immense ocean, it's impossible not to feel a profound sense of awe and perhaps a touch of trepidation. The ancient Filipino sailors, like all mariners facing the raw power of nature, possessed a deep spiritual connection to the sea. It wasn't just a physical space to be navigated. It was a realm of powerful deities, spirits, and elemental forces that demanded respect, appeasement, and understanding. You feel a shiver that has little to do with the night breeze. It's the awareness of being a guest in a mighty sacred domain. The ocean was alive, not just with fish and whales, but with unseen presences. Ancient Tagalog belief, for example, included Amansinaya, a primordial deity of the sea, often depicted as a powerful goddess or sometimes a king who could be both a benevolent provider and a fearsome destroyer. Other regional mythologies across the Philippine archipelago and broader Austronesia populated the seas and skies with a host of anitos, spirits or diwata, nature deities or demigods associated with winds, currents, storms, specific marine creatures, and even particular geographic locations like capes, reefs, or whirlpools. A mainstream historical fact is that pre-colonial belief systems throughout the Philippines were animistic, attributing spirits to natural phenomena and objects, and the sea was a particularly potent spiritual landscape. Before embarking on a significant voyage, and often during the journey itself, rituals and offerings will be performed to seek favorable conditions and protection from these powerful entities. You might see the lead navigator or a designated ritual specialist making an offering, perhaps a portion of food, a precious bead, or a libation of rice wine, cast into the waves accompanied by prayers or chants. These weren't seen as mere superstitions, but as vital interactions, a way of maintaining balance and goodwill with the spiritual guardians of the deep. Ignoring these protocols was to court disaster. Right, lads, let's not forget to offer the sea spirits the first catch of the day, unless someone fancies explaining to a grumpy water deity why we're eating his fish without permission. Certain parts of the ocean might be considered particularly sacred or dangerous, the domains of specific powerful spirits. Navigators would know these areas often through ancestral stories or hard-won experience, and would approach them with extra caution, perhaps performing specific rituals or even taking a longer, safer route to avoid them altogether. A particular reef known for shipwrecks might be seen as the lair of a malevolent spirit, while a calm, sheltered bay might be considered blessed by a benevolent one. Historians still argue about the precise mapping of these spiritual geographies, as much of this knowledge was oral and localized, but the general principle of a spiritually charged seascape is well established. Even the barangay itself could be seen as having a spirit, or at least as needing to be consecrated to ensure its safety and success. The selection of the tree for its hull. The carving process and its launching would often be accompanied by ceremonies. Sometimes symbolic items might be embedded in the keel or prow for protection or good fortune. The boat became more than just a vessel. It was a trusted companion, a sacred space, and a vital link to the community's survival. You pat the smooth, worn wood of the gunwale, a silent acknowledgement of its steadfastness. Quirky tidbits abound in folklore regarding interactions with marine spirits. Tales of sailors being guided by friendly dolphins or turtles sent by benevolent deities, or being led astray by mischievous sprites who mimic the cries of seabirds or create phantom islands are common in maritime cultures worldwide, and the Philippines is no exception. There might be specific taboos to observe, while at sea, perhaps certain words were forbidden or certain actions believed to anger the spirits. Whistling, for example, was sometimes thought to call up a storm, a belief that lingered among sailors well into modern times. It's like maritime etiquette, but with much higher stakes than just offending your host. Offend a sea spirit, and your dinner reservation might be at the bottom of the ocean. The stars, too, were often imbued with spiritual significance, not just as navigational markers, but as celestial beings or the homes of ancestors. The songs that guided you, as we've discussed, were not just mnemonic devices, but also, in a way, sacred texts connecting the earthly realm of the canoe to the divine realm of the cosmos. The navigator, therefore, was not just a technician, but also a kind of priest or shaman, mediating between the human world and the spiritual forces that governed the voyage. His ability to read the signs, both natural and supernatural, was seen as a gift, a form of spiritual insight. This profound respect for the ocean also fostered a sense of stewardship, though perhaps not in the modern environmentalist sense. It was more about understanding the limits, respecting the power, and not taking more than was needed. There was an awareness that the ocean's bounty, while vast, was not infinite, and that angering its guardians could lead to scarcity or peril. This worldview, where the natural and supernatural are inextricably linked, shaped a very different relationship with the marine environment than our often more exploitative modern approach. So as the barangay sails on through the night, you are enveloped not just by water and stars, but by a living, breathing spiritual presence. Every creak of the timbers, every whisper of the wind, every splash of a wave can be interpreted as a message, a sign, a reminder that you are a small part of a much larger, sacred, and often mysterious order. This reverence is not born of fear alone, but also of a deep intimacy and a hard-earned wisdom passed down through generations who made their lives upon and in partnership with the mighty ocean. Let's try to imagine more concretely how this song star maps, these lyrical celestial charts, might have actually worked. While we don't have direct transcriptions of ancient Filipino navigational chants in a way that a modern cartographer could plot, we can make educated guesses based on the principles of oral tradition known Pacific Islander navigational techniques and the structure of epic poetry and song. You settle back listening to the navigator's voice as it rises and falls, painting pictures with words and melody, the stars above seeming to align with his verses. The core idea is that a song or chant would describe a journey segment by segment, each verse or group of verses could correspond to a particular leg of the voyage, encoding several types of information. Firstly and most obviously, star guidance. The lyrics might name a sequence of steering stars, stars that you would aim your canoe towards as they rose on the horizon, or stars that you would keep at a certain bearing, e.g., off the port bow, as they arced across the sky. For example, a verse might say something like, "When the hunter raises his spear in the east, follow its glint until the three sisters awaken from their sea slumber." This translates to steer towards the rising of Orion's belt, and when the Pleiades rise, they become your next guide. This is a mainstream historical concept. The use of successive star bearings is fundamental to non-instrumental navigation. The melody and rhythm could also carry information. A faster tempo or a more agitated melody might indicate a stretch of dangerous water, perhaps with strong currents or hidden reefs, requiring heightened alertness. A slower, more flowing melody could signify a long, steady leg of sailing in open, predictable waters. The number of beats or stressed syllables in a line, or the number of repetitions of a chorus, could subtly encode distances or travel times. For instance, sing "The Dolphins Leap" verse 5 times, and you should reach the shallow passage. It's a bit like a musical Morse code, but far more poetic. If the song suddenly sounds like a frantic sea shanty about angry crabs, you're probably about to hit something. Adjust course accordingly. The lyrics would also incorporate landmarks, both celestial and terrestrial, when closer to land. A specific verse might describe the point at which a prominent coastal mountain on a known island dips below the horizon behind you, or when a new distant island is expected to appear. These sung instructions would also include information about sea marks, the characteristic swell patterns, the color of the water, the types of birds or fish you'd expect to see in a particular area. When the waves whisper secrets against the hull from the south and the frigate birds dance like joyful spirits, know that the Isle of Sweet Bananas is but a day's embrace away. Consider how an epic poem structure could be used. An entire long-distance route, say from a major island in the Philippines to a trading partner in Indonesia, might be encompassed in one grand epic. Different books or cantos of the epic would detail different major sections of the journey. Within each canto, individual verses or stanzas would provide the more granular star-by-star, swell-by-swell instructions. The overarching narrative of the epic, perhaps involving mythical heroes, gods, and ancestral voyages, would provide the memorable framework, making the dry data of navigation stick in the mind. Historians still argue about how much of the mythological content was purely narrative embellishment versus deeply symbolic encoding of navigational or environmental information. A quirky but plausible idea is that the very structure of the song could mirror the geography. For example, a song describing an archipelago might have a recurring chorus when sailing in open water between islands, and then more complex, unique verses to describe navigating the specific channels and approaches to each individual island. The shape of the melody, its ups and downs, might even subtly reflect the profile of an island as seen from the sea, or the undulation of a particular swell pattern. This is speculative, of course, but oral cultures are incredibly inventive in their use of mnemonic structures. Moreover, these sung maps were likely not static. They would be living documents, updated and refined by generations of navigators. If a new safer passage through a reef was discovered, or if a volcanic eruption altered a familiar coastline, the song might be subtly changed, a new verse added, or an old one modified. This adaptability is a hallmark of oral tradition, allowing knowledge to evolve with changing circumstances. It's like open source software, but for singing your way across the ocean. Version 3.2 of the Mindanao to Moluccas shanty now includes the verse about avoiding that new sandbar. The beta testers, well, they had a rough time. The performance of these songs would also be crucial. The tone of voice, the pauses, the emphasis on certain words or phrases, all could convey nuances of meaning that might be lost in a simple transcription. An apprentice wouldn't just learn the words, they'd learn the performance, the embodied knowledge of the master navigator. So you listen to the rise and fall of the chant, the rhythmic cadence. It's more than just a pretty tune. It's a complex, multi-layered information system, a testament to the human brain's capacity for memory and pattern recognition, and a beautiful fusion of art and science. Each note, each phrase is a brushstroke in a vast, sung seascape, guiding you, reassuring you, and connecting you to the accumulated wisdom of all the sailors who have sung this very song under these very stars. The universe itself seems to hum along. As you continue your mental voyage guided by these lyrical star charts, it's worth pondering the specific celestial tapestry that ancient Filipino sailors would have gazed upon. While they would have certainly recognized some of the same prominent stars and constellations we do, Orion, the Pleiades, Subaru, to some the Seven Sisters, to others Scorpio, they would have had their own names, their own stories, and their own unique interpretations woven around them, forming a distinct celestial mythology that informed their navigation. You look up, trying to see the familiar patterns through their eyes, to hear the forgotten star stories. Many cultures around the world group stars into constellations that reflect their own environment, mythology, and daily life. It's highly probable that ancient Filipinos saw patterns in the sky that mirrored the animals, objects, and heroes significant to their culture. Instead of a Greek hunter, Orion perhaps, they saw a giant fisherman casting his net, or a great canoe sailing across the celestial ocean. A mainstream historical point is that ethnostronomy, the study of how different cultures understand and use the sky, reveals an incredible diversity in constellation systems and celestial lore worldwide. The specific constellations used by early Filipino navigators are not as extensively documented as, say, Polynesian star lines, but linguistic clues and surviving folklore offer tantalizing glimpses. For instance, the Pleiades star cluster is visible from both hemispheres and is a significant marker for many cultures. In the Philippines, it's often associated with the start of the agricultural season. For navigators, its rising and setting points would have been key reference markers. Perhaps in their songs, the Pleiades weren't just a cluster of stars, but the brood hen with her chicks, and their appearance signaled a particular time to sail or a specific direction to head when they reached a certain point in the sky. Similarly, Orion with its distinctive three-star belt, is hard to miss. While the Greeks saw a hunter, ancient Filipinos might have seen it as balatik, a kind of spear trap used for hunting wild pigs. Its position and orientation would be crucial for direction finding and timekeeping. Scorpio, with its curving tail, might have been seen as a giant shrimp or a deadly scorpion as in Western tradition, but perhaps with local legends attached that cued navigators to seasonal weather changes or currents when it dominated the night sky. Historians still argue and research the precise identification and meaning of many indigenous Philippine constellations, as much of this knowledge was lost or suppressed during colonization. It's like trying to piece together a beautiful, shattered mosaic. A quirky and fascinating idea is the concept of dark constellations. Some cultures, notably in South America, but also potentially in other regions, don't just see patterns in the stars themselves, but also in the dark patches of the Milky Way, the interstellar dust clouds that obscure the stars behind them. These dark shapes might be seen as animals or other figures. Could ancient Filipino navigators have also read the dark rifts in the Milky Way, perhaps seeing a celestial river or the shadow of a giant crocodile whose orientation provided navigational clues? It's an intriguing possibility that highlights a different way of perceiving the cosmos. Don't just look at the light's apprentice. See the shapes in the shadows between them. That's where the really old secrets hide. The names given to individual bright stars would also have been culturally specific and mnemonically powerful. A star that always rose in a particular direction might be called the Eye of the Great Ancestor, or the Torchbearer of the East. These evocative names would make them easier to remember and identify than a mere catalogue number. The stories associated with these stars would further embed them in the navigator's memory. Perhaps a tale of two lovers who became stars, forever chasing each other across the sky, would actually encode the relative positions and movements of two important guiding stars. Moreover, the celestial sphere looks different depending on your latitude. Navigators in the Philippines, being relatively close to the equator, would have a different view of the circumpolar stars that never set, than someone in, say, Northern Europe. They would also see stars of the southern hemisphere that are invisible from more northerly latitudes. Their star maps and songs would be perfectly attuned to their specific geographic location. This local adaptation is key. A star song from Luzon might have subtle differences from one originating in Mindanao, reflecting the slightly different celestial perspectives. The disappearance of a star below the horizon could be as significant as its appearance. The setting path of a star was just as important for orientation. A navigator might be instructed to sail towards a newly risen star for a certain period, then, as it climbed too high to be a useful directional guide, switch to another star that was then setting in the desired direction. It's a continuous handoff, a celestial relay race. Understanding these forgotten star stories and indigenous constellations is not just an academic exercise. It's about recognizing the intellectual achievements of these ancient cultures, their sophisticated understanding of the cosmos, and the unique ways they encoded this knowledge. It's a reminder that there are many ways to see the sky, many ways to map the universe. As you lie on the deck of your barangay, you imagine these ancient patterns taking shape above you, a sky filled not with Greek heroes and Roman gods, but with the spirits, animals, and ancestral figures of the islands, each one a friendly beacon in the vast, sung ocean of night. While the sophisticated understanding of stars, swells, and sung maps form the core of their navigational toolkit, it's plausible that ancient Filipino sailors also utilize other, perhaps simpler, environmental observations or even rudimentary aids to supplement their primary methods. Not every leg of every journey would require complex celestial calculations, especially when sailing in familiar waters or close to shore. You scan the horizon, your senses alert, not just to the grand cosmic ballet, but also to the more humble, immediate clues the environment offers. One fairly straightforward observation, particularly useful when land is just out of sight, is the behavior of land-based smoke or clouds. We touched on clouds forming over islands, but the drift of smoke from cooking fires or cleared land could also indicate the direction of land, especially in the morning or evening when fires are most active. The smell of that smoke, as mentioned before, would be an even more direct pointer. It's a bit like following breadcrumbs, but the breadcrumbs are airborne and require a good nose. This is a generally accepted ancillary technique in many coastal navigation traditions. The presence of floating debris could also be an indicator, though a less reliable one. Coconuts, branches, leaves, or man-made detritus washed out to sea could suggest you are down current from an island. The type of debris would be important. Fresh green leaves would indicate land is closer than old, waterlogged branches. However, ocean currents can be complex and debris can travel vast distances, so this would likely be a secondary or confirmatory sign rather than a primary navigational method. A slightly soggy banana leaf. Could be from Uncle Manuel's beach cookout yesterday, or it could have circumnavigated the globe. Let's check the stars again, just in case. What about rudimentary charting or marking? While extensive written charts were not a feature, it's not impossible that navigators made temporary markings or diagrams. Perhaps on a smooth piece of wood or a section of bamboo, a navigator might scratch a simple diagram of a coastline, a reef system, or the relative positions of a few key islands for a specific localized journey. These wouldn't be formal maps in our sense, but more like personal memory aids or tools for explaining a route to the crew. Historians still argue whether any forms of graphical representation, however ephemeral, were used alongside the oral traditions. The famous stick charts of the Marshall Islanders, which depicted swell patterns and island locations, are a testament to how sophisticated such simple aids could be, though direct evidence for identical systems in the Philippines is less clear. Another subtle but important observation would be water temperature. While difficult to gauge precisely without instruments, a seasoned navigator might be able to detect slight changes in water temperature that could indicate entering a different current system or approaching shallower coastal waters, which might warm or cool differently from the open ocean depending on the season. This is more in the realm of highly attuned sensory perception. Bioluminescence in the water at night could also occasionally offer clues. The wake of the canoe or the splash of paddles might disturb dinoflagellates, causing them to glow. The intensity or pattern of this bioluminescence can sometimes be affected by water depth, currents, or the presence of schools of fish, which in turn might relate to proximity to land or specific marine features. It's a beautiful, if somewhat unpredictable natural light show with potential informational value. A quirky and perhaps more speculative idea involves the use of captive birds. While observing wild bird flight patterns was key, some theories suggest that on very long voyages into unknown waters, canoes might have carried a few land-finding birds like frigate birds or homing pigeons, though the latter is more associated with later periods. If the crew suspected land was near but couldn't see it, they might release a bird. If the bird circled and returned to the canoe, it meant no land was within its range. If it flew off, purposefully, in one direction, it was assumed to be heading towards land, and the canoe could follow. This is more documented in Norse exploration, but isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility for other seafaring cultures facing similar challenges. Okay, Bartholomew, the frigate bird, your big moment. Find us some dirt, there's a good chap. And try not to get eaten by a bigger bird this time. Sound, too, could play a role, especially near land. The roar of surf breaking on a reef or a distant shore can travel a surprising distance over water, especially at night when other sounds are muted. The calls of land-based animals or even human activity could also be heard before land was visible. Your ears become an extension of your eyes. These ancillary methods, while perhaps not as systematically complex as star navigation or swell analysis, would have formed part of the navigator's overall situational awareness. They were the small details, the subtle confirmations or contradictions that a master of the craft would constantly be processing, integrating them into the larger picture derived from the more reliable celestial and oceanographic clues. It's like a detective gathering all sorts of minor clues to build a complete case. Every piece of information, no matter how small, could be valuable when your life and the lives of your crew depended on making the right decisions in the vastness of the sea. How do we know all of this, given that those ancient Filipino sailors primarily relied on oral traditions and sung maps, leaving behind few, if any, written navigational manuals? What clues allow us to reconstruct their incredible maritime skills? The answer lies in a combination of whispers from the past, archaeological discoveries, linguistic analysis, surviving oral traditions, and comparative studies with other Austronesian seafaring cultures. You lean closer, as if trying to catch these faint echoes carried on the sea breeze across the centuries. Archaeology provides some of the most tangible evidence. The discovery of the Butuan balangays in the southern Philippines, as we've mentioned, was a landmark. These sophisticated plank-built outrigger boats, some dating as early as 320 AD, are physical proof of advanced boat-building technology capable of long-distance voyaging. Their construction size and even the goods found in association with them, like Chinese ceramics in nearby sites, speak directly to a vibrant seafaring culture engaged in both exploration and trade. Mainstream historical consensus considers the Butuan boats as icons of early Southeast Asian maritime prowess. Finding such a vessel is like uncovering a lost chapter of history, its timbers whispering tales of ancient voyages. Beyond boats, archaeological sites on distant islands across the Pacific showing settlement patterns that align with linguistic and genetic spread from Southeast Asia indirectly support the navigational capabilities required to reach them. The presence of distinctively Austronesian pottery tools and domesticated plants and animals in these far-flung locations is evidence of purposeful, navigated colonization voyages, not just accidental drifts. Linguistics offers another powerful line of inquiry. The Austronesian language family, to which most Philippine languages belong, is one of the largest and most geographically widespread in the world. By tracing the relationships between these languages, linguists can reconstruct proto-languages and map the historical pathways of migration. The very vocabulary related to boats, sailing stars, and marine environments found across these diverse languages often shares common roots, pointing to a shared ancestral maritime heritage. For example, words for outrigger, sail, or specific star names might show cognates across hundreds or even thousands of miles, indicating that these concepts were part of the cultural toolkit of the original migrating populations. Historians still argue about the precise dating and branching of these language trees, but the overall picture of maritime dispersal is clear. Surviving oral traditions, though often fragmented or altered over time, can also hold valuable clues. While specific navigational chants might be lost, broader epic poems, myths, legends, and folklore from various Philippine ethnic groups often contain references to great voyages, heroic navigators, interactions with sea spirits, and detailed knowledge of marine life and celestial bodies. These stories, when carefully analyzed, can reveal underlying cosmological beliefs and traditional ecological knowledge related to the sea. A quirky tidbit, sometimes what seems like a fantastical element in a myth. Say a hero conversing with a specific type of bird before a voyage might actually be a coded reference to observing that bird's behavior for navigational clues. It's like sifting through layers of narrative to find the kernel of ancient practice. So, when the legend says the giant crab carried the island on its back, it might just be a poetic way of describing how to navigate around a crab-shaped reef during high tide. Or it could just be a very strong crab. Comparative ethnography, studying the navigational practices of more recent or contemporary traditional seafaring cultures in Oceania, like those in Micronesia or Polynesia that retained non-instrumental wayfinding techniques into the 20th century, provides invaluable models for understanding what might have been possible in the past. While not a direct one-to-one comparison, the principles of star compasses, swell, analysis, and oral transmission of knowledge observed in these societies offer compelling analogies for how ancient Filipino sailors might have operated. These living traditions serve as a window into the sophisticated cognitive and observational skills involved. Then there are the accidental historical accounts from early European explorers and colonizers. While often biased and incomplete, some of these early chroniclers noted the impressive boat-building skills, seafaring prowess, and navigational abilities of the peoples they encountered in the Philippines and surrounding regions. They might describe large trading canoes or mention local pilots who guided European ships through treacherous waters using their traditional knowledge. These accounts need to be read critically, but they sometimes contain inadvertent corroboration of indigenous maritime expertise. Piecing together these diverse strands of evidence is like detective work. No single clue tells the whole story, but taken together, they paint a compelling picture of a people who had mastered the art of ocean voyaging, who read the stars and the swells like an open book, and who sang their maps across the vast blue expanse. It's a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of these ancient mariners whose whispers still echo in the languages, stories, and archaeological sites they left behind. While we celebrate the incredible skill, courage, and artistry of these ancient Filipino sailors and their song star maps, it's crucial to remember that their voyages were undertaken in the face of very real and often terrifying perils. The Pacific Ocean, even on its calmest days, is an environment that demands constant respect, and for every successful voyage, there were undoubtedly others that met with misfortune. You feel a sudden gust of wind rattle the sail, a reminder of the ocean's unpredictable power, and the balangay shudders slightly, a small, vulnerable craft in a vast wilderness. The most obvious danger was, of course, storms. Typhoons, the regional name for hurricanes, are a frequent occurrence in the western Pacific, and even a well-built balangay with a skilled crew would be severely tested by the mountainous waves and ferocious winds of a major storm. Capsizing, dismasting, or simply being swamped by water were constant threats. Imagine being caught in the maelstrom, the sky black, rain lashing down, the roar of the wind and waves deafening, trying desperately to keep your small vessel afloat and oriented. Mainstream historical understanding acknowledges that storms were a primary cause of maritime disaster in all pre-modern seafaring. There would be no coast guard to call, no rescue helicopter. Survival depended entirely on the strength of the canoe, the skill of the crew, and perhaps a significant measure of luck or divine favor. Getting lost was another profound fear. Even with sophisticated navigational techniques, a prolonged period of overcast skies obscuring the stars or an unexpected current carrying the canoe off course could lead to disorientation. If you lost your bearings, the chances of stumbling upon a small, isolated island in the vastness of the ocean were slim. Running out of fresh water or provision on such an unplanned detour would be a slow, grim fate. The anxiety of not knowing where you are with supplies dwindling must have been immense. Well, according to the song, we should be seeing the island of abundant coconuts by now. All I see is more water. Anyone else fancy a rousing chorus of the increasingly desperate shanty? Navigational hazards like uncharted reefs, shoals, and submerged rocks posed a constant threat, especially when approaching unfamiliar coastlines or sailing at night. A momentary lapse in concentration, a misjudgment of water depth, or an unexpected current could lead to the canoe striking a reef, tearing a hole in the hull, or becoming hopelessly grounded. The sound of wood splintering against coral would be a sound of pure dread. Historians still argue about the efficacy of various methods for detecting submerged hazards in different water conditions, but it was undoubtedly a major concern for navigators. Beyond the elements, encounters with hostile groups could also be a danger, though perhaps less so on the truly open ocean voyages of discovery and more in regions with established populations and potential rivalries. While trade and cultural exchange were common, so too were raiding and conflict in many parts of the ancient world. A canoe laden with valuable trade goods or venturing into waters considered the territory of another group might be seen as a target. And then there were the more insidious dangers, sickness and injury. On a long voyage with limited medical knowledge beyond traditional remedies, even a minor infection or a broken bone could become life-threatening. Lack of sanitation, dietary deficiencies, leading to conditions like scurvy, though their diverse diet, including fresh fish and preserved plants, likely mitigated this better than some later European sailors, and exposure to the elements all took their toll. The cramped conditions on board would also mean that any contagious illness could spread rapidly. A quirky though no less serious peril could come from within a crisis of leadership or a loss of morale. If the navigator made a mistake or if the voyage dragged on much longer than expected, doubt and despair could set in among the crew. Maintaining discipline, hope, and a unified sense of purpose in the face of extreme hardship would have been a critical leadership challenge. The songs in this context weren't just for navigation, but also for maintaining spirits, reinforcing shared identity and purpose. The psychological toll of these voyages, the sheer isolation and the constant awareness of danger should not be underestimated. The endless horizon, the vastness of the sky, the knowledge that you are days or weeks from the nearest solid ground. It could be both exhilarating and terrifying. The spiritual beliefs and rituals we discussed earlier would have been vital in providing comfort, meaning, and a sense of control in an environment that so often felt uncontrollable. Remembering these perils doesn't diminish the achievements of these ancient sailors. It amplifies them. Their willingness to face these dangers, to push the boundaries of their known world, armed with their knowledge, their skill and their courage, is what makes their story so compelling. Every successful landfall, every return journey was a triumph against considerable odds, a testament to their resilience and their profound mastery of the sea. As your barangay sails on, you carry a deeper appreciation for not just the how of their journeys, but the immense bravery it took to even begin. As our journey through the world of ancient Filipino sailors and their sung star maps begins to draw towards a gentle close like a barangay, finally sighting the familiar shores of home. After a long voyage, we reflect on the enduring legacy of these masterful navigators. Their voices, though now mostly silent, still resonate in the currents of history, in the languages spoken across vast oceans, and in the enduring human spirit of exploration. You feel the rhythm of the waves subtly changing, a sign that perhaps land, or in our case, the soft embrace of sleep is drawing near. The most tangible legacy is, of course, the peopling of the Pacific. The ability of Austronesian mariners, including those from the Philippine archipelago, to navigate and settle such a vast oceanic realm, is a monumental achievement in human history. Their voyages reshaped the demographic map of a significant portion of the globe, carrying languages, cultures, and agricultural practices to islands previously untouched by human feet. Every time you look at a map of Oceania, at those scattered pinpricks of land, remember the skill and courage it took to connect them, guided by stars and song. This is a mainstream historical understanding that the settlement of the Pacific was a deliberate navigated expansion, not a series of accidental drifts. The linguistic heritage is another profound echo. The Austronesian language family stretching from Madagascar to Easter Island with its heartland in Southeast Asia is a living testament to these ancient voyages. The shared vocabulary related to seafaring astronomy and the natural world found across these diverse tongues whispers of a common ancestral maritime culture. Even if the specific navigational chants are largely lost, the languages themselves are like ancient vessels carrying the DNA of that seafaring past. While the Songstar maps themselves may no longer be performed in their original context for open ocean navigation in the Philippines, the spirit of that oral tradition, the importance of communal memory storytelling and song continues in many indigenous cultures. Epics, ballads, and traditional chants still recount tales of ancestors, heroes, and connections to the natural world, including the sea and sky. Historians and anthropologists continue to work with communities to document and revitalize these traditions, recognizing their immense cultural value. There's an ongoing debate and effort regarding the decolonization of knowledge, seeking to bring indigenous perspectives, including traditional navigation systems, back into broader historical narratives. The boat-building traditions, too, carry a legacy. While modern materials and techniques have largely replaced ancient methods, the fundamental designs of some traditional Filipino watercraft still show echoes of the outrigger canoes that carried their ancestors across the seas. There are ongoing efforts in some communities to revive and preserve traditional boat-building skills, recognizing them not just as historical artifacts, but as living cultural heritage. Seeing a newly built balangay or a similar traditional craft take to the water is a powerful connection to that past. A quirky but poignant legacy is the sense of interconnectedness that these voyages fostered. In a world that often feels increasingly fragmented, the story of these ancient sailors reminds us of our shared human capacity for exploration, adaptation, and connection across vast distances. They weren't just navigating physical space. They were weaving a web of human relationships, trade, and cultural exchange across the waters. That inherent desire to connect, to understand what lies beyond the horizon, is a deeply human trait they exemplified. Maybe, you muse, the ocean isn't what separates lands, but what joins them if you just have the right boat, the right song, and the courage to follow the stars. The resilience and ingenuity embodied by these ancient navigators also offer a timeless inspiration. Faced with immense challenges, they developed sophisticated systems of knowledge perfectly attuned to their environment, relying on their intellect, their senses, and their deep communal wisdom. It's a reminder that human innovation isn't solely the domain of modern technology. It has ancient roots, often expressed in beautifully intricate and sustainable ways. As the first light of dawn, or perhaps just the gentle glow of your bedside lamp, begins to soften the darkness, the tale of these singing sailors fades into a soft, resonant hum. Their balangays have sailed over the horizon of our story, but their journey continues in the collective memory, a testament to a time when the stars were not just distant lights, but intimate guides, and the ocean was not a barrier, but a song waiting to be sung. The gentle lapping of waves against the hull of your imagined canoe becomes softer now the stars above, perhaps a little dimmer as the world around you transitions. The need for precise navigation lessens as you drift closer to the calm shores of sleep. The voices of the ancient mariners, their songs of the cosmos and the currents become a soothing murmur, a lullaby carried across the ages. They navigated by a wisdom we can now only glimpse, a harmony with the natural world that allowed them to read the ocean's swells like a familiar story, to hear the melodies in the starlight. The challenges they faced, the immense courage they displayed, now serve to gently underscore the peace of your own quiet space, the safety of your own calm harbor. Let their skill and their spirit of adventure inspire a sense of wonder, a quiet appreciation for the vastness of human history and the incredible journeys undertaken. The ocean of dreams awaits a tranquil sea under a friendly sky. There are no storms here, only gentle currents to carry you into deep, restorative rest. The last echoes of the sung star maps fade into a profound and peaceful silence.